What's poppin', B? Today, I'm gonna teach you. You're gonna get learned today. I'm gonna teach you about two things, actually. How a bone heals and the fetal skeleton. We're on the topic of bones today. This is Cupnatomy, my guy. So, what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about how a bone heals first. Because, that's just thrilling. I know you've been sitting up at night having an existential crisis like, what the hell? How does my bone heal? I'm here to put those qualms to rest. So, let's say, for example, you got a long bone here. Long bones found in the leg. Not anatomically correct drawing. That looks terrible. It looks like a bathtub with wheels at the back. But that's not the issue here. The issue here is that this bone is broke. That's a broken bone. Not good. So what we're going to do is I'm going to tell you what happens at the site of the break. So first off, you break your bone. You break your bone, not good. So you go to the doctor. The doctor sets the bone. So they set it in straight. So say if your bone was offset, the right side was pointing upwards and the side was pointing out, they would push it back together so it's straightened up, and then they'll slap a cast on it. That'll be our cast, because I can't draw for the life of me. Basic stuff. They would set the bone, and they just put a cast around it. But you'd think, oh, but how? Yeah, I knew that. I want to know is how the hell the bone itself heals. It's not just, fun fact, just, bitch. They don't just snap back together. God, something on the windowsill. You don't just snap back together. They make new bone. But how do they make new bone? I'll tell you about how they make new bone. Two things. This will be our osteoblast, and this will be our osteoclast. These are how you get new bone. Now, this right here. This is the osteoblast. Osteo, please mind my god-awful handwriting, means bone. And blast. What the hell is that? That looks like a sneeze. Oy gavolt. And blast means creation. So it's bone creation. Pretty dope, right? Dope sickness. So what the osteoblasts do is they go to the site of the break. And what they do is they make more bone matrix, right here. And you'd think, oh, they just filled in. Not so. They put excess as some leeway, So you have all this excess bone matrix on the side here, and that's why at the site of the break, the bone itself is always harder. The site of the break, the bone is harder than everywhere else. Like these parts here. This part is harder, since there's more bone matrix. And because there's more bone matrix, you'd think, but wait, my bone, after breaking, still feels straight as an arrow. How did that happen? That, my friends, because the osteoclast. And what they do is they also go to the side of the break after the osteoblasts have made more bone matrix, and they just digest. They just digest that, they gobble it up, and they store it. So they eat that. And what it does is, it leaves just it pretty much just erodes the excess, and you have a nice straight bone again. Of course, it's not that fast. It's not just instant, you have a new bone again. It takes anywhere from, 6 to 8 weeks. It's a gradual process, but it's a process all the same. And that's how a bone heals. Bonus lesson. Did you know that the long bone is technically made of two kinds of bone? This part of the bone, the ends, are made of spongy bone. And what spongy bone does, it absorbs the shock. So that's when, you jump and land on your legs, they don't just crumble. That's thanks to the spongy bone. It absorbs the shock pressed on it by surrounding bones, such as, your femur and your foot. with the force, with the upward force and the downward force pressing down on the spongy bone, it absorbs the shock. And of course, you know, it doesn't just crash your bones together because you have a thing called cartilage. And that is what prevents you from getting your bones abrased against each other. That's how you get, and that's how you get arthritis. The cartilage between your bones, it starts to, you know, erode away. So the bones rub against each other, and you got no synovial fluid to, you know, help mitigate that. So the bones are grinding against each other, causing pain. And that's how you get arthritis. But that's not the lesson here. We're talking about the parts of the long bone. So you got the cartilage on the ends of the bone, of the long bone, and you got the spongy bone in the bone. Now, what's this middle part? You'd think, oh, that's the bone marrow. You may be kind of right. I mean, because yes, there is bone marrow in there, but there's also cancellous bone. Now, what cancellous bone is, it's more of a structurally sound kind of bone, in that it helps provide the stability and the structure of the long bone. If the whole part of your bone was made of spongy bone, that'd be a nightmare, because, you know, you squish down on it. It's not good. It's just not good. So you got the spongy bone here, and the cancellous bone here. Think of it like this. The cancellous bone is what gives it the structure. The spongy bone is what saves it from breaking. Think like this, like a sponge. Got a sponge. You press down on a sponge, it doesn't shatter, it squeezes with it. And when you squeeze with it, it absorbs the shock. And the cancellous bone, I can't really think of any wordplay. That looks like a robot, not a sponge. I can't think of any wordplay to help you with cancellous. So just know that cancellous is not spongy bone. And cancellous, it keeps the structure of it. And now let me talk to you about the fetal skeleton. As I'm erasing this, the fetal skeleton is actually not made of bone. The fetal skeleton is made of a thing called hyaline cartilage. As you develop, the hyaline cartilage making up your fetal skeleton turns into bone. Gradually, of course, that's what leads to you growing. The hyaline cartilage stretches out and turns into bone matrix, thus giving you your height. Say, Jimbo here. You know, what's poppin', Jimbo? Hi, guys. I'm funny. He's like what's like the average height of a child? Like 1'3". His hyaline cartilage stretches out, you know, turns into bone. It stretches out. Real long boy. These are not bones at all. They look like stones and rocks. But he grows up, and he becomes a long boy. He grows up since the hyaline cartilage extends and turns into the bone matrix. He becomes taller, like a 5'7". 1'3" to 5'7" is not an accurate translation between the heights, because I don't know. I was like 1'2" when I was born. Now I'm 6'4". Something happened. Now, you're wondering, why is the fetal skeleton made of hyaline cartilage? Why can't it just be made of bone? Well, for one, chuckle nuts, you can't be born with bone because you wouldn't be able to grow. And also, it would be hell for your mother, because if you came out of her snatch with a fully developed skeleton, it would be a nightmare. Different topic, kind of. Not talking about snatches anymore. If you don't know what a snatch is, stay pure. So what the thing is, so the height, that's pretty cool. So we'll talk about the skull first, since that's pretty different and interesting. Looks like a bullet with a tumor, but you know, what can you do? But the plates in a newborn skull are not pressed together and fused yet. There's still space for them between. Those are known as, I believe they're called the brain sutures, or I forgot the name of them. Fuck. But they're there to give the brain leeway to grow, since you're not born with a fully developed brain, because the brain is actually smaller than the rest of the skull as a child, as a newborn, as a fetus. So as it grows, it presses against the hyaline cartilage skull cap, and once it's pretty much like set in stone, they fuse. The plates fuse and form a solid skull cap, which eventually turns into, which, as I explained before, hyaline cartilage extends and turns into bone matrix, giving the brain more leeway to grow, so your brain doesn't grow against your head and you die. So that's why a skull is made of hyaline cartilage. Now let me talk to you about what not to do with a newborn, a fetus. For one, we're going to talk about two things. Well, technically one thing with two different outcomes. Here's a crib, just without the fence around it. And here is our baby. There's little Pete's. Don't know why his legs are up. That's not the problem here. You don't want to, or why he's floating above the bed. Shut up. So you don't want to leave a baby on its back for too long, because, as we discussed before, the skeleton is still made of hyaline cartilage, and hyaline cartilage is very, flexible and malleable. Malleable is the key word here, because if you leave a baby on its back for too long, it'll flatten out the back of its skull. Call it flathead. But you also don't, so you think, oh, let me flip the baby over and put it on its stomach to sleep. Arguably even worse thing to do, because if there's a downward force, or technically an upward force if it's on the downward force of the gravity and also the upward force of the bed, since it's not entirely give, it's creating pressure. It's creating a downward pressure on. No, it's not. It's creating an upward pressure on the ribs, and the ribs going into the thoracic cavity, into the lungs, the heart. That leads to a terrible, terrible thing we call SIDS. Now you're wondering, Nutcup, the hell is SIDS? I'll tell you what SIDS is. It stands for Sudden Infant Death Syndrome. Sounds silly and fake, right? It's not. It's a very real thing. It's very terrible. It's exactly what it sounds like. Sudden Infant Death Syndrome. And that can be brought about by a few things. One of them being letting your child lay on their stomach for too long and causing the ribs to go into the thoracic cavity, not really destroying, but just damaging the internal organs enough to lead to death. Sudden infant death syndrome. And that's why you don't want to leave them on their back for too long, but don't leave them on their stomach for too long. The back is a bit more leeway, since, it doesn't go, it's not like the ribs where they just go into it really is just it's really just the flat back of the head. You really just don't want to do it. That's the main thing of this. My professor, she said, you don't want to leave a child on its back for too long when it sleeps. Give it ample belly time. I turned to my friend and said, that's what they called me back in the Bronx, and she lost it. So that's an easy way to remember it. For me, at least. Ample belly time. So that's your lesson in Cupnatomy. That's Cupnatomy. I'm a teacher. Goodbye.